feel that Checo is, everyone says he's in the form of his life, and I kind of agree with that. You know, I think he's driving a car that he's confident with. That's a big thing in Formula One. You know, confidence is really key. Your head has to be in the right place. And I think last year he was driving a car that was really developed around Max and was quite pointy, and he doesn't like a pointy car. So I think he's got a car now underneath him that suits his driving style a bit more, and he's able to take the fight a little bit more to Max, which is really good to see. I'm loving it. It's the first time for a while we've seen Max really challenged within the team. He's one of the drivers who is enjoying these new regulations because of the more stable rear. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. You know, Max was always able to have it on the nose, snaps of oversteer, you could catch them, whereas most drivers really struggled with that. And, you know, Alex Albon being one of them, and you see how competitive he is this year in the Williams. So people just have different styles of driving, and I think Max is the one that's really he's got the different style to most drivers out there. But great to see Checo finding a car that suits him, and he's you know, we're seeing his true skill now. I mean, they've ended up, I think, becoming the strongest driver pairing on the grid. You know, I'm having to sort of eat my words in terms of prediction, because at the start of the year I thought Mercedes on paper felt to me like they had the strongest driver lineup, followed by Ferrari, followed by Red Bull. But to be fair to Checo, compared to last season, he has really stepped it up. And yes, of course, the cars are suiting him a bit more, etc., etc. But he is delivering, and you know, real big credit to him for that. Yeah, as Sergio Perez comes in, 2 laps is enough for him out there in these conditions. He's back in the garage. Top time belongs to Yuki Tsunoda right now. Quickest in the last sector as well, he has been. Then comes Sebastian Vettel, Kevin Magnussen, and Lance Stroll. And the Aston looking pretty good around here. I mean, it was quick in the dry yesterday, particularly with Sebastian Vettel's hands. It was, and Sebastian in third, and Stroll on a good lap. He's done the purple first sector. As we said, he always seems to be competitive in wet conditions. Yeah, let's just wait and see how the session unfolds once we get the likes of Verstappen and the Ferrari setting up proper times. But as you said, Jensen, Stroll across the line to go second. It's got a yellow flag somewhere in sector 1, which is quickly clear. I presume somebody cutting across turn 1, but he's not had a lot of luck on home ground, has he, Lance? He scored points with Williams when he was here a few years ago, but his most recent visits haven't really gone to plan around his home circuit. This was the yellow flag. It was Tsunoda down into 1, locking up the inside front. Team radio?
Front left is so easy to lock up.
Copy, Yuki.
There you go. Explained it very nicely for us. It's very polite. Yes. Well, there was some asterisks there at the start. We missed that bit. I mean, they can adjust the brake bias in the car, so we can always move it rearward, but that's always a little scary in the wet as well. You don't want to be locking the rears. You want to ride the curbs around here, don't you? In the dry, you do. In the dry, yes. The wet, it's tricky. If you've got the car pointing in the right direction, sounds silly, but when you hit the curb, you're fine. But if you're slightly off angle, it can really jump the track or cause you to spin easily. I'll tell you what's going to be really interesting this session is all of the secret spy photographers that the teams all hire. They'll be out in force because you're able to really see, just on those slow-mo shots, the way that the water is flowing, coming off the diffuser, the floor of the car. The spy shots that the teams will be taking, no doubt Ferrari and the Red Bull, to try and uncover a few little secrets, really, of why these two cars are performing as well as they are, and other teams up and down the pit lane will be very keen to spend this following week understanding it a bit more. Which particular areas will they be looking at, Karun? As we look at one now, where are they going to be focusing the lenses? It was interesting, just you can see the head-on shot, actually, just where the water is coming through the floor, those tunnels, the ground effects that Jensen said. Look, underneath the car, you wouldn't have seen the way that the water is coming through those channels in the same manner last year. And most importantly, out the back of the car as well. You know, what the teams will be looking for is to have the photographers in the pit lane for when the cars come back in, because you'll be able to see
you know, the watermarks effectively on the carbon fiber, the diffuser, just which way the airflow is flowing, and those are the pictures that they want for their R&D teams back at base to study.
They'll be hoping that the water is dirty.
Yes.
Judging by the state of my boots yesterday and this morning, it's very dirty.
But it's also interesting to see under the cars, because, yeah, I mean, normally, oh, that's a big snap. Normally we're seeing the side of the floor down on the ground, but you're not seeing that.
Just watching Carlos Sainz, he's gone quickest in Sector 1 so far, 27.8. 3/10 quicker than anyone else so far.
Yep, struggling to put down the power there. A lot of wheel spin, laterally loaded. Still struggling. So much torque with these cars. It's not easy to drive around here in the wet conditions.
Slightly 2/10 down on Sebastian Vettel through that middle sector. See how he finishes off this lap then. A lot of the other teams still in the garage right now. No time for either Mercedes yet, or the Williams. Perez went out for a couple of exploratory laps, but Max hasn't got in the car yet either. Quickest in the final sector and goes quickest overall.
So it works in the wet as well then, the red
car. It does, the Ferrari works in the wet as well. Does it work well enough though? This is the big question. We need to see the Red Bulls get back out and see what the conditions are like out there. Doesn't seem to be much of a dry line appearing though, Jensen, yet.
No. Definitely not, but the car looks so stiff, doesn't it, over those curbs? You don't really see any suspension movement at all. No, pretty impressive lap. He's on it again. He's 4/10 up in the first sector.
That rain's not going anywhere, is it?
No, but it doesn't. It's not hard. It's a drizzle, isn't it?
Tell that to Ted.
who's stood in the rain, yeah.
I had an answer for the porpoising on our bus journey in yesterday. So our bus driver has a seat that is very highly sprung, and he bounces every time. The roads here are pretty bumpy, aren't they? Very bumpy.
Yes.
And he bounces in his seat as we all get thrown out of ours. Okay. And I thought, there you go, there's the answer.
Yeah.
Surely.
I don't know how they're going to do that in a race car, but there has to be a way of getting some type of foam under the bum of the drivers. The only issue is that you have a height restriction, so you're limited of how high you can be in the car for safety. So. But there's always a possibility to get something under your bum, so it's a bit more comfortable.
Some bouncing there from Carlos Sainz. Still going quickest though on this lap.
Yeah, their speeds are a lot slower. They're much slower than what we saw yesterday. Obviously, we had DRS that we could use yesterday. Today you can't. But in the wetter conditions, you are going slower. Also, the car is higher off the ground.
We saw some work going on down at the Haas garage a few moments ago. Ted's down there. Got some news on Kevin Magnussen for us, Ted?
Well, Magnussen isn't in the car. He doesn't really fancy this, actually. He's just, you know what, he is. He's just gone in. So he's sitting there, but doesn't look like he's going out. It was Mick Schumacher, Rachel, who was trying to get in his car, and then they discovered something that they needed to take the seat out for. So he was actually out again, talking to Gary Cannon, his engineer, and now they fixed whatever it was that was loose around the bottom of the cockpit, put the seat back in, and Mick is settling himself in. But you've got to say, a day like this is an opportunity for Mick Schumacher, an opportunity for mistakes, certainly, but an opportunity for good results and for points. And that's something that Haas are going to be aiming for, that relationship that he's got with Gary Gannon. Did I call him Mick Gannon earlier?
You did, yeah.
Don't know who Mick Gannon is, if anyone knows. Hello to him. But Gary Gannon is such a great engineer. I don't know if anyone ever listens to some of the radio messages during the race or after it on any of the red button channels or our digital channels, but they get on so well. He's such a sort of calm, reassuring presence for young Mick Schumacher. It's a great relationship they've got, and hopefully it will yield something today. Mick's got some very good galoshes, I think we can call them, Rach. He's been standing around, little welly boots, yes, branded Sparko welly boots. 3 words I didn't think I was going to say today. And he's been going around the wet conditions, so he doesn't have to have wet soles of his driving boots when he gets in the car. Gents, is that really a thing? Can your feet really slip off the pedals if you've been walking around in the rain?
Well, if you've got wet feet,
yeah.
But you do have grip tape on the pedals. and also you have sides to the pedals, so your foot can't slip off left or right. But he'll be taking his those wellies off when he gets in the car. Yeah,
Sparko welly boots.
Yeah, I didn't have anything fancy like that. I usually should wear my trainers until I got in, and then put my race boots on.
Thank you, Ted. We do see, actually, as the drivers get in, them having the bottom of their boots wiped, don't we,
Yes.
so that they're dry. I mean, I don't even have any on right now. I had to take them off when I came in here because they were so soaked. I needed my socks to dry out, so I may pop down there and see if he's got a spare pair of those galoshes for the rest of this session, which is going to continue to be very, very wet.
You know
Correct?
what? Yeah, I was just thinking, you're thinking about opportunities, and Ted was talking about Mick Schumacher there. I think it's a big opportunity for someone like Fernando Alonso in the Alpine. We've seen him, they've got better pace, haven't they? Baku, they're good pace in the dry, and Fernando, there's something a bit special about him in all sorts of conditions, and you do wonder if they've got a car that works reasonably well in the wet, he could be there or thereabouts. The other one is his fellow Spaniard, Carlos Sainz. He's top of the time for the moment, and he's always been very good in the wet. The first time I met Carlos was he was doing Formula 3 at Monza, and it was a soaking wet day, and he was at times 2 seconds a lap quicker than the rest of the field. He absolutely dominated it, so clearly inherited a bit of low grip car control from his father, obviously double World Rally champion. And I wonder if this is a big day for Carlos. His teammate starting at the back of the grid. He's not had the best start to the season against Leclerc. He really needs to score big. He's had quite a few DNFs already, hasn't he, this season? And to me, this is, when I think of opportunities, it's people like that, Sainz and Alonso, for me, that are sort of top of the list that could get something in these conditions.
Well, when you look at the times, Fernando is able to get the tyres working quicker than all the others. First proper flying lap was 38.3, which is quick for the first lap, so see what he can do in his second. But that's going to be key as well in qualifying. You're going to be, wanting to get those tyres working ASAP.
Tyres on this track conditions, because looking at the weather system, they realised they knew it wasn't going to clear up for quali.
Max Verstappen looking very quick then. Perez a little bit of work to do, but both thereabouts, and of course Red Bull leading both championships. And I mean, at the moment, streets ahead of their nearest challenges. Ferrari, Carlos Sainz, we're looking great. We'll try and take a stroll over there, at least to get you a shot of the Ferrari garage. We've sort of got Anchorman Wars with another TV crew next to us. But we are moving for you. So Charles Leclerc, of course, is taking that engine penalty.
Yes,
he will be at the back of the grid. Carlos Sainz, I said, looked good in free practice. Yesterday, he looked good in free practice earlier on as well, and certainly on the intermediates. But he really has got to step up now, hasn't he? Because, I mean, previously, obviously, this has all been about Charles Leclerc's championship fight, but Carlos Sainz should be there as well. That car is equally as competitive.
Yeah, and you've used exactly the right words there, Laura. He has to step up. Today is the day for him. Charles Leclerc will not be contesting pole position. They're likely just do one lap, bring him in, keep the car safe, keep it out of the barriers in these conditions, and he'll be good to go for the Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz has to get in the mix, if not ahead of both of those Red Bulls. This is his chance to shine, to show the team, yeah, you know what, I am here, I am in the mix, because let's imagine we get a situation where he doesn't out-qualify the Red Bulls or finishes a little bit behind them, or anybody else, fast Fernando Alonso, someone like that. If Charles Leclerc can fight his way from the back of the field up to Carlos in the Grand Prix tomorrow, they're going to have to sort of initiate team orders and move them around. This is Carlos's time. This is his real chance to say, yeah, I'm here, I'm worthy of not just being at this team, but being that, your number one driver as well.
And I think for both, well, necessity and I think strategy as well, this is the best place for Charles to take this engine penalty, knowing I think that Red Bull will have to take one at some point throughout the season anyway. Carlos Sainz, though, what can he do? Here in qualifying, it's a wet quali as well, we must point out.
I mean, look, if this morning was anything to go by, he looks lightning on those intermediate tyres. Looks really good for him here. Yeah, Red Bull have got the fastest car. They don't look as happy on the intermediates, but Carlos was looking really, really good earlier. So I think the team will be confident, hopeful that they can take it to Red Bull this afternoon, but I guess it just depends, doesn't it? Who's got the dry setup that works best in the wet? That's the big question.
And that's the balance, isn't it? And so much of the chat for this weekend has been about the compromise between driver safety, driver health and performance. And now, of course, we have this crossover between wets and intermediates for quali as well. I mean, at the moment, it's looking to me full wets.
It's difficult, isn't it? I think because we've had I think it was like a Formula Ford race earlier, so no wings, not a very fast race, not many cars out there, so they haven't sort of dispersed the water off the track. Yeah, it'll probably start full wet, but then you will start to get that line, as you say, it's then the crossover. Does it come between sessions? Does it come in the middle of one of the quali sessions, probably, you know, in the middle of a Q2 or a Q3? It's just going to be about seeing how heavy the rain falls and how many cars are out there to disperse the water. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? A real battle. And we mentioned, of course, Charles has taken that engine penalty. He took electronics initially for the 10 grid drop, and then 10 grid place drop, and then went for the full hop. Everything. Yeah. He's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but probably rightly so for Ferrari. Yeah, absolutely. Look, he's going to start in the lower half of the order anyway. You can overtake around this track. It's a good place to do it. They've got good pace. They know that they should theoretically be finishing on the podium, regardless of where they start this Grand Prix. So yeah, might as well start at the back and have a whole new heap of units to put into the pool. He was saying yesterday that overtaking was a little bit more tricky, perhaps, than he anticipated. But Ferrari, nonetheless, have Gambard, and Charles Leclerc will start at the very back of the grid, and we'll have to see what he can do from there. I'm going to bring in, for the first time, our F1 technical analyst, Sam Collins, to discuss a little bit more about Ferrari's chances this weekend. Sam.
Well, just throwing back to a comment you were just talking about, it wasn't a Formula Ford race. It was a Formula Ford race, but with Honda engines in the back of the cars. Work that one out if you want. But it is, you're right, I want to talk about engines, or power units to be more specific. And taking a look at who's got what left on the grid. Two drivers are not going to take really a huge amount of part in this qualifying session. Charles Leclerc, you heard about, and the reason he's starting the race from the back of the grid is that he has taken his fourth combustion engine, his fourth turbocharger, fourth MGUs. He hasn't taken a new energy store, still on his first one, and his fourth set of control electronics. And it's the control electronics that he changed first. That got him a 10-place grid drop. And then he decided to take the rest of the parts that he make up another new power unit. So going into this race weekend, Charles Leclerc took most of a new power unit, taking it up to his third. He didn't get a penalty for that. Then he took a control electronics. That gave him 10 paces. And then what you'll actually see, because he had that failure in Baku, which you can see on your screens, he then went and took another whole power unit. And that's quite a clever strategic move. They know they're not going to qualify particularly well, starting in no higher than 10th position. He's got that 10-place grid penalty. So he'll probably, and then he had to take the other part, start at the back. The other driver, though, who isn't going to play a big part in qualifying, is actually on the second page of the screen. It's Yuki Tsunoda. Now, you see he's gone up to using his fourth set of power unit parts as well. The Japanese driver will start the race at the back of the field. Now, that's important because he's on a Honda engine, he's on a Honda power unit, and the reason that's a concern is because he's gone up so high. He had that failure in Saudi Arabia. That's exactly the same problem that could befall Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly, and they are all on identical power units. Pierre Gasly, though, he's looking a little bit worried. He's up on his third set of power units already. He's reached the limit, so he will be taking a penalty before the season, probably 2 or 3. But one of the things I wanted to look at are some of the other drivers who are struggling. Valtteri Bottas, he's running out of components. Kevin Magnussen is as well. Mick Schumacher is marginal. But going back to the first page, take a look at Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. And that, for other Ferrari, the reason Carlos Sainz isn't doing so badly as his teammate on those power unit parts is he had those mishaps on the opening laps of a couple of races, Spain and one of the earlier ones. Now, he lost out on mileage, which meant his power units are a bit fresher than Charles. But he's already used up his last combustion engine, so he will be running out before the end of the season. So penalties to come for Carlos Sainz. The only other driver I really wanted to highlight here, though, and he's one of the most exciting in the field because he took the pain early on. Fernando Alonso, his teammate Esteban Ocon is marginal as well, but Fernando Alonso saw this situation coming at the Spanish Grand Prix. He'd had a bad qualifying session, so he decided to take a new set of power unit parts. He took that penalty earlier in the season, started the Spanish Grand Prix from the back of the grid. He knew he wasn't going to have a great day out. Well, he's got fresh parts, and it means he's not going to be taking a lot of penalties as the season goes on. So when people like Leclerc, when Sainz, when Gasly, when some of the other top runners take penalties, Alonso's going to win out on all of those. And so I think, as is always the case with Fernando Alonso, he's playing it very, very clever. And I think we're going to see more of that this afternoon, Laura.
Oh, how exciting would it be to see Fernando Alonso and even someone like Sebastian Vettel front row for the Canadian Grand Prix? Just turning back the years.
Well, the great thing is, they've looked quick in all conditions, the Aston Martins and the Alpines this weekend. In the dry yesterday, in the top 10, looking great. Fernando really hustling the car around this track. And then when the rain fell this morning, again, looking fantastic. We know that the Aston and the Aston drivers love these conditions. We look back to Turkey a couple of years ago, how well they went in quali and the race. We look at these guys again this morning. Esteban Ocon loves the way he can find grip out on the track where few others can. I remember his early races with Marussia or Mana, whichever team it was back in those days in Brazil, and he could find that grip around the track where other drivers seemingly couldn't. You know, these are the kind of conditions that play into their hands, and I think today, we said it on the drive in this morning in the car on the way in, Laura, you know, look to Alpine, look to Aston Martin to spring a surprise.
And, I mean, Fernando Alonso looked unbelievably quick this morning, didn't he?
Confident.
And confidence, that's exactly what I was about to say. And especially on those intermediates as well. Yeah. He was just moving the car in a way that suggested that he is fully tapped in, dialed in to both the setup. I think they've nailed that for him this weekend. Like you said, I think previous weekend they perhaps went a little too far in that setup for the low downforce in Baku, but here they seem to have got it just right. They've got that balance right, and Fernando Alonso is flying, and confidence on a quali in conditions like this is going to be crucial.
Well, he was one of the first to go out on the intermediates, and Sam Collins, you know, was saying during commentary, oh, is it a bit too early? It looks really wet. Why are they going out on the inters? Don't think it's the right time. But as soon as Fernando started lighting up the timing screens, purple sector 1, purple sector 2, purple sector 3, then went out and improved again, and was setting lap times a second, 2 seconds quicker than anyone else, everyone followed suit. But Fernando had that confidence immediately to say, yeah, I can go out there in these conditions, I am going to push it, I am going to take it to the absolute limit, and showed what he can do. It was mesmerising watching him in the wet this morning.
Yeah, it was. And Esteban Ocon as well. I was just checking. P4 in FP3 as well. The Alpines have got pace, and they are up there, and they're looking very quick in race pace and quali trim as well. Let's have a chat about McLaren. Let's have a little walk down this way. I can't see where we are. Yeah. Walk down this way if we can toward McLaren. Daniel Ricciardo seems happier this week, doesn't he? He seems a little bit more comfortable. Indeed, we're just going to wait for the safety car to come through. He looks more comfortable indeed than Lando Norris, perhaps.
Yeah, a little bit, actually. Let's not get run over by race control. Yeah, they're both looking happier. They were good top 10 in the dry. They looked pretty good this morning as well, it's got to be said, in those wet conditions. They're not totally on top of the car yet. It's still a difficult one for them. They're not where they want it to be. They want it to be fighting for podiums, but again, these are the kind of conditions that could play into their hands, you know, because we could get a shaken up order as a result of the cool conditions and the rain falling.
They've closed the gap, though, haven't they, that had emerged between the likes of Ferrari, Red Bull. McLaren are beginning to just push up there, although Alpine have sneaked in.
It's so track-specific, though.
Yeah.
This is the thing, and that's what's wonderful with this midfield battle, is the ebb and the flow between who's looking good at one track compared to another. You know, we came here this weekend, we didn't expect Aston Martin or Alpine to look as competitive as they have, and as we've said, it's not just been in these wet conditions. It was in the dry yesterday that Aston and Alpine looked really, really good as well. AlphaTauri were quick as well. Pierre Gasly, P2 this morning. AlphaTauri on a bit of a resurgence, a great run in Baku. Pierre Gasly getting his elbows out in Monaco as well. It's just the intensity of this midfield fight.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And we've all said coming into this weekend that if you're good in Baku, you'll be good here. And we're seeing that with the likes of Vettel, with the likes of Gasly as well. Mercedes, my goodness me. Your interview with Lewis Hamilton yesterday, it's gone everywhere, hasn't it? Just how sort of upset, disappointed, and seemingly at a loss of what to do with the car as it is at the moment. He's almost resigned to his fate at this point.
I got a text yesterday from a friend of mine who's a massive Lewis Hamilton fan. He said, I don't think I've ever heard Lewis so upset. And I was like, yeah, but mate, he's not upset. He's just kind of resigned to it now, accepting of the situation, just saying, this is our lot, this is the car. Whatever we do to it, it's just not getting any better. And he was so eloquent in describing how difficult the car is to drive. And I think he's just had to accept this is it now. Now I've got to make the best of this bad situation. The team's been apologizing to him for a bad car, but at the same time, George is able to pull out some really good results in it. Lewis looked like he was a little more comfortable in it. I mean, not physically comfortable, but in terms of the race results, certainly in Baku, he was looking more comfortable with it. But again, this weekend, Lewis way off where George is able to get that car.
Yeah, he is indeed. P13 down the order in FP2, of course, representative of race day tomorrow. Certainly not representative of conditions we are seeing here. If you're just joining us, very wet, very, very cold as well. Mercedes with the floor, though, for Lewis's car. They tried things with that setup, didn't they? And they've actually reverted back, haven't they?
They have, yeah. They tried to take a big sort of wedge out of the floor in an effort to just try to get over some of the issues that they had in Baku. It didn't work. They reverted back to the normal floor. They then went completely polar opposites on setup between George and Lewis during that FP2 session. It didn't work out for Lewis. It worked far better for George. So they found a compromise between the two, and that's what they're running today. But there's still a little bit of sort of niggle around at Mercedes. They put a second floor stay on the floor just to try and stop the arcing of that floor again, to try and ease the issues from Baku. They've taken that off. They say for performance reasons. Also, though, because there was a massive threat of a protest from other teams because they're only allowed one stay at the rear of the car, not two.
Yeah, safe to say that was a controversial move by Mercedes. Teams reacting to it. It got a little bit heated. They have taken that off. As you said, for the first time, they were going to hear the thoughts of Tom Gaymore and Jolyon Palmer in commentary. How are you doing, guys?
We are looking drier than you, and we're slightly warmer as well.
I need someone to get Will a blanket.
Cheers.
It's giving me the heebie-jeebies seeing you shiver down there.
Yes, we've got plenty of F1 Live questions coming in on Twitter, a lot of them aimed at Will Buxton and whether or not he's going to be able to get a coat and some gloves for the rest of the session. Now, we spent the whole of free practice 3 smiling. The conditions very, very similar for qualifying, it looks like. Some of the drivers, there's no hiding from the fact that some of the drivers will be relishing this challenge, Jolyon. Some others, not so.
Yeah, I can't wait for this. This is going to be a great, great qualifying session, I think. Earlier on, we saw driving in the wet, and the cars were on the edge. The rear grip looks particularly tricky, some brake locking as well, a couple of moments at turn 1. A couple of big lockups into the hairpin at turn 10 as well. And the drivers were really, really fighting. But they had nothing to gain by going over the limit or push to the limit because you don't want to risk the crash. Now they do. So, as you say, there's going to be some that are really going to relish this. And they're going to be thinking, OK, wet day in Montreal, this is my chance. And there'll be others, maybe the Red Bulls, who in dry conditions with no Charles Leclerc there are thinking, we're hunky-dory here. We're going to lock out the front row or maybe have a Carlos Sainz threat. But we should be under control. That's not the case anymore. There's going to be some plucky midfielders, I'm sure, thinking this is their day. The likes of Fernando Alonso, as Will and Laura have said, flying today. And Sebastian Vettel going well as well. So many of the midfielders, they can do it.
I think the next talking point is whether or not we can get onto the inter tyre. We saw in free practice 3 that inter tyre in those conditions slightly quicker than the wet weather tyre, but a little bit more treacherous, risk versus reward.
Yeah, it's always the dilemma in the wet conditions, whether you can get onto from a full wet tyre that I think looks like we're going to start on. It looks pretty grim out there. Whether they can go to an inter, possibly a slick, but I don't see it happening today with the temperatures so low and the amount of rain out there. If you can cross over and get onto the drier tyre, the intermediate it'll be, there's more performance there. But of course, it's sketchier, it's more slippery, it's easier to stick it on the wall. It's a bit of a knife edge then to make sure you're on the right tyre at the right time and you're pumping in the lap.
Thank you. Well, let's head back to Laura and Will.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for your thoughts there. Quite jealous you're both so warm, and we'll get Will a blanket and some gloves and a coat very soon as well. I must say thank you to him for holding the umbrella like a gentleman the whole time. While I've got you both, though, I'd love to hear your predictions for qualifying and, as you've just said, what could be a very unpredictable and indeed yellow flag, red flag strewn qualifying.
Well, Jolyon, you're the expert here, so I'll let you go first.
I'll kick it off. As much as we've all been bigging up the midfielders, I'm still going to plump for Verstappen, you know, because he's so good in the rain and the downforce is still king in these conditions. I still think Verstappen. I'm going to chuck a Fernando Alonso in the top 3, and we'll go with Carlos Sainz in there as well. That's my top 3 with Verstappen on pole.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Fernando Alonso before Sam does. I think he's very keen on Fernando Alonso, but
Alonso for pole?
Why not? Why not?
Throwback.
Love it. Lovely stuff. I'm also going to go for Fernando Alonso as well. Sam, coming to you. Who's your pick? Don't say Fernando as well.
It's not Fernando Alonso. Actually, it's something that we were talking about in commentary. I think we're going to see Aston Martin up there. I'm going to go for Sebastian Vettel because I think that weather's going to dry out and we're going to be on intermediates by Q3, and I think the green cars are going to be very, very fast.
We've all woken up in 2012, haven't we?
Thank you very much. Thanks very much to all of you guys. Just come to Will very quickly. Your man on pole.
Oh, Vettel.
Vettel on pole. I'm going for Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel. Thank you for joining us here in a very wet, windy and cold pit lane. Join Tom, Jolien and Sam in commentary. Will and Nick de Vries for post. Enjoy the Canadian Grand Prix qualifying.
Here, so I'll let you go first.
I'll kick it off. As much as we've all been bigging up the midfielders, I'm still going to plug for Verstappen, you know, because he's so good in the rain, and the downforce is still king in these conditions. I still think Verstappen. I'm going to chuck a Fernando Alonso in the top 3, and we'll go with Carlos Sainz in there as well. That's my top 3 with Verstappen on pole.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Fernando Alonso before Sam does. I think he's very keen on Fernando Alonso, but
Alonso for pole?
Why not? Why not?
Throwback.
Love it. Lovely stuff. I'm also going to go for Fernando Alonso.
Mesdames, Messieurs, bonjour. Bienvenue ici au Canada.
Montreal, wet qualifying. Welcome along to Canada, the return of the Canadian Grand Prix, the 41st Canadian Grand Prix to take place here in Montreal at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. We are right in the middle of the St. Lawrence Seaway. The river is the wet bit with the boats. The track is the wet bit with the cars. That's the only differentiating factor today. The rain came down after FP2 yesterday, and it pretty much has not stopped ever since. The track, 2.71 miles long, absolutely saturated, and you take your lap time at full throttle in the dry for 61%. How often can you get on full throttle today? The hard compound tyre is the C3, the medium's the C4, the soft is the C5. I wouldn't imagine we're going to see any of those today. It's the inters, potentially. It's the wets, definitely, when we get going. And Martin Brundle, I cannot wait to get going because there's nothing I like more than a damp track for qualifying, because I'm in a warm, dry commentary box with you and I'm not one of the 20 out there coping with the conditions.
It's a tough track at the best of times, and especially in these conditions. Of course, it's a parkland circuit in terms of the road that's used year-round, but Wall's very close. As you see from the high shots, the helicam, that we are basically, literally, it's just the track and then water everywhere else. So nowhere to really create a lot of runoff. So make a mistake, lots of little dips and bumps and slippery curbs to move the car around, and you'll be in the wall.
Emergency ponchos, very much the order of the day here. The crowd have been absolutely fantastic so far today. They're in really good spirits despite the atrocious conditions, and it is a very cold day here in Montreal. The track temperature has dropped all the way down to just under 18 degrees, and the last time I looked at the track, Martin, there was still an awful lot of standing water on it. Now that hopefully will clear quite quickly, but if it carries on raining, it's not going to dry out enough.
No, we know that the Formula One wets, the extreme wets, lift an incredible amount of water, and it's really interesting to see the aerodynamics of the car then as you see the flow come over and particularly off the back of the cars. And it's you would always want to be on the intermediates if you can. You've got more rubber on the track as long as you're not aquaplaning. So the moment you think you can get through the standing water on the inters, you'll be on them. But meanwhile, you need to put the extreme wets on to make sure you don't, and straight into the wall. You just become a passenger in the car then.
In 2 of the last 3 races, Charles Leclerc has retired from the lead of the race, and it has been power unit problems that have caused those DNFs. As a result, he takes a brand new power unit for this race and will start at the back of the grid. Yuki Tsunoda is another to take extra elements. He will start at the back too. Whoever qualifies the highest will beat the other to that last spot. So Tsunoda and Leclerc, we should see them on the track, certainly in Q1.
I know, it seems wrong, doesn't it? I mean, Leclerc, I think, could easily be leading the World Championship. So you've taken the pain of dropping out of a Grand Prix and losing maybe 25 World Championship points. And then you take the pain again because you need another power unit. It's the same for all the drivers, but it just seems too extreme to me. But Ted's got more news for us, I know.
Hello, Martin. Hello, Crofty. Hello, everybody from the pit lane. Yes, extreme is the word for the tyres that the Alfa Romeo Saubers have gone to the end of the pit lane on. And they are the wrong tyres for the conditions because it's just about stopping raining. So this is plum intermediate tyres. So they decided that about 3 minutes ago, the Saubers, and I'm waiting to see everybody else. As you can hear the engines fire up behind me, and this Aston Martin's just going out. Actually, no, it's Sebastian Vettel on full wets as well. Lance Stroll on full wets. Let's see what the McLaren's, I think, on intermediates. So just for this early sighter laps, we've got a mix of tyres as they try and figure out how damp the track is. I actually saw the 2 race directors, Eduardo Freitas and Niels Wittich, go out in the safety car before this session. I was worried that they were going to suspend the beginning of the session, delay the session, Crofty. But I think they could see what we could see in terms of the radar saying the rain was easing up, which it has.
Yeah, we still remember Monaco. I'm glad we've started on time today. There was no reason to suspend it. Wet weather tyres for everyone who's made their way out of the pit lane so far. So that's Russell Verstappen, Bottas, Joe, Hamilton, Esteban Ocon too. And here's the view from the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, who is experiencing the turning circle of an oil tanker. Sorry, Sergio Perez. I thought it was Verstappen coming out that these Formula One cars have, and making his way finally out onto the track. Even if it is stopping raining, Martin, and there's still a few puddles I can see where the water's falling down onto, that's the state of the track, and that moisture is going to stay around here because, as you said, it's a parkland track. A lot of trees overhanging this racetrack. It's not going to dry out quickly.
It's not, and also the mist tends to hang a little bit between the walls and the trees, as you can see down to turn 8 there. And yeah, you wouldn't want to risk intermediates, certainly for the early laps. You've got to generate some tyre temperature, and the Red Bull didn't seem particularly good at that in free practice 3 this morning. Unlike the Alpine of Fernando Alonso, the Aston Martins look good out there as well, and the Ferraris look mighty in terms of generating some tyre temperature and grip. And we know from yesterday, the only ones who've got the confidence to start climbing over some of the curbs. So that's what it's all going to be about, tyre temperature. And this is going to be a fascinating session. Track is borderline red flag, I would say, at the moment, but they'll get away with it. But visibility is certainly marginal out there. And try and find a little bit of space doesn't help your tyre temperatures either.
So there's plan to get a time on the board nice and early, just with the high risk of yellows and reds.
And that is the problem. When we get conditions like this, your qualifying can be ruined by somebody else ruining their qualifying. And you can catch yourself on a really good lap, and then there's an accident, and somebody goes into the wall, there's a red flag or a double wave yellow, and you lose your lap time. So get out there, get going, and in the case of Max Verstappen, try and keep it in a straight line.
There's a massive puddle at the first corner. So why does it look clear from up here and not down there? Well, you're looking through about 2 meters of spray at the back of the car. When you're following another car, you're looking through 200 meters of spray, and that's why it looks so different from on board to this shot here. It's a different perspective, and actually irrelevant what we can see from here.
But you automatically tense up when you see this shot, because you know that Verstappen is treading so carefully and almost tiptoeing those 4 wheels around the circuit. And well, even then, it was just so difficult to stop the car and then pick the right line through the chicane.
And this is the aerodynamics we're talking about. Look at the back of the car. Look at the way the water is pulsing out the back of the car. And it's our best chance to see how the aero on a Formula One car works. There was a massive puddle on the inside of turn 1, some standing water also here and there. And that's a much more realistic, unsurprisingly realistic view of what the drivers are actually seeing.
Into the final chicane we go then with Max Verstappen. Everybody out on track, including Tsunoda and Leclerc, who are vying for the wooden spoon in this particular qualifying session. And through the mist comes the world champion, Verstappen, with a 137.4. George Russell at 136.6. Guan Yu Zhou 138.6. And then Bottas and Hamilton completing the top 6 now, as Esteban Ocon goes 3rd fastest. Now, Ocon's teammate, Fernando Alonso, was quickest earlier today in free practice 3. Sebastian Vettel, who's 3rd fastest at the moment, finished that session for 3rd fastest. We ought to mention Pierre Gasly, who put his AlphaTauri at 2nd fastest. And just talking in the paddock, the engineer, those that were in the top 3 caught their best laps when the track was at its driest. The rain kind of fell, eased off, and then fell once again. So that's another factor to take into the equation here. The track might get a bit drier and then might then suddenly get wetter.
Yeah, the full wets are lifting 60 litres per second at high speed. So you tend to get that dull grey double track, and that is when you can start thinking about intermediates, when that's all the way around the racetrack. And yeah, that's definitely marginal on Viz, isn't it? And you can see then the rain lights, but only when you just about get there. Now, he slowed down, but of course you don't click the timing beam until quite a bit further down the straight, but he won't exactly be anywhere near normal speed. But will it matter on a lap like this? We'll find out. I think the Ferraris are good, but Leclerc has gone out there to do a lap time that would at least get him ahead of fellow back row sitter Tsunoda with his penalties.
There are a few that are having lap times deleted as well. That could come into effect, and it's for exceeding track limits, as you'd expect. On a day like today, there are some corners you can't exceed the track limits, the wall's in the way, but there are others, and if you do go over that white line with all 4 wheels, then you are going to get your lap time deleted by our race directors and stewards. Alonso is on a terrific lap here. He is excelling in these sort of conditions. You go back to Germany 2012 for the last pole position for Fernando Alonso, and it was a wet day that day.
I see a lot ahead of me.
Lewis Hamilton out on the track, right behind Zhou Guan Yu and Charles Leclerc currently.
Alonso's got a great chance of a front row of pole position today. Vettel too. This is a day for the old hands, especially though if you can fire up your tyre temperatures and get some confidence and belief through the puddles. And swinging around then into the first corner. Okay, let's go and have a look at this instead.
Carlos Sainz, who's best qualifying here, is 8th. Never qualified in the top 7. Goes fastest overall with a 135.8. Meanwhile, in the bottom 5 currently, with 11 minutes to go, Stroll, Perez, Zhou, Leclerc and Latifi. Things are going to change quite dramatically, and you're going to need your team as well to tell you when to come in potentially, Martin, for a new set of tyres, a warmer set of tyres, give you more grip.
Yeah, And also, critically, they've got squarer edges on the tread, which bites through the water so much better. If you start smearing the tread blocks around a little bit, they aquaplane more easily. And that's the shortcut then for Lando Norris. And he goes straight to the exit of turn 2, so they will have fueled the cars nice and long, as we mentioned. But something Jensen said earlier on, I found myself nodding to while we were earlier on in the show, is you must not tense up in the car. You've got to be relaxed. The car can feel it. If you're tense on the wheel and the pedals, and every time the car moves, you tense a little bit more, then it will slide more. You've really got to believe in you, the car, and just trust it and get on. Much easier said than done.
Just to give you an example and an idea of just how difficult these conditions are, the lap record in terms of the fastest ever lap here, Sebastian Vettel in a 1 minute 10 seconds, 0.2. Currently, George Russell with the fastest time, 1 minute 34 seconds, 0.9. Ted, down to you.
So the other reason Hamilton's telling his team that he can't see through the spray is that he has no idea where other cars are around to position himself for traffic. If anyone is quicker behind him, he needs to let them through. So he's getting that information via his team. Yes, someone's 3 seconds behind you, the other person's 3 seconds in front of you, or whatever it is. So that's why he wants to tell him that he just can't see around him. We've had the first pitter. It's Yuki Tsunoda, car 22, of course, with a grid penalty himself for a new power unit element. So I'll let you know whether he goes out again, and if he does, on what time.
And Mr. Friday, Saturday and Sunday, George Russell, fastest at the moment.
Yeah, he wants to lose the Mr. Saturday tag. I've said we'll call him Mr. Consistency now.
Yeah, he's just delivering up, isn't he? So it does look so much easier from up there, doesn't it? Lando Norris on 2 personal bests. Can he make it 3 and move himself up from 15th? I'd imagine he will. And only up to P5.
So that puts Bottas and Leclerc, Stroll and Latifi and Magnussen in the bottom 5. Stroll and Latifi, the 2 Montreal-born drivers. And Kevin Magnussen just goes right from the back all the way up to the front. 134.8 for him.
And they've quickly learned not to go anywhere near the apex of turn 1 because of the puddle. They go all the way around the outside of that. And of course, yes, they'll fuel along and they just keep running. It might be last person over the line that saves his own time and remains in qualifying.
Yeah, these are, to give a bit of boxing parlance, it's like a bit of jabbing and some sparring for 12-15 minutes or so, and try and avoid a knockout blow that's self-inflicted, and then it really starts to get serious with about 5 minutes to go. But you want to be putting as much distance as you possibly can between yourself and that elimination zone, and that's what Valtteri Bottas has just done with a 134.8. Bottas, former front row sitter here in 2018. George Russell next across the line goes fastest overall, and George Russell, a man who's only raced here once, qualified 18th that weekend, finished 16th in the race, but he's in a very different car as Max Verstappen now goes fastest, and the time's starting to improve, and improve by quite some margin, even though we've still got a few puddles, even though the track is still very, very wet. A line is now appearing as we can go on board in the Alpine, and if there was a car in front, we wouldn't be able to see much, but fortunately, Fernando Alonso is a fair way behind Sergio Perez. Look at the rooster tails that you can see. You were saying, Martin, 200 metres ahead, and there's still a lot of mist.
In that little left kink there after the hairpin wasn't absolutely flat out, and a bit of bouncing going on there, a bit of porpoising. Oh, that just looks horrific to be sitting inside, to be honest. Trying to look out of that. I don't know, it looks like peeping out of your garden shed, doesn't it? Sort of through the doors when it's raining one day. It all seems so enclosed to me, but it certainly seems fast to Fernando Alonso.
Oh, come on, if I gave you the option, garden shed or Formula 1 car this afternoon, I think you'd leave the garden equipment alone for a while.
Yeah, but it just, you know, those cab forward 1980 sort of Formula 1 cars, you could see the whole world out of those. The drivers are so buried inside these cars.
That Charles Leclerc has avoided, but you couldn't see it. Such was the spray coming off Valtteri Bottas's Alfa Romeo in the foreground. Charles Leclerc currently 7th fastest. 6 minutes to go. Sainz, Alonso, Verstappen, Russell and Ricciardo, the top 5. I can tell you Sebastian Vettel's just been in for a new set of wet weather tyres. Whether that's a couple of minutes too early or not, we'll find out. We can have a look at the view from Nicholas Latifi and his Williams cockpit heading down towards turn 1.
So they get pulled here, lock the inside front, and then as soon as the tyre's not rotating, it's not slowing the car down either. And you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, in terms of getting yours. The Alpine of Ocon does the same thing. You kind of, you've got to take your foot off the brake, but you've got to keep braking, and you're past the point of no return, and so you then start thinking of plan B quite quickly.
Tell you what, when you see the visor cam of Fernando Alonso and then Esteban Ocon, you realise how much higher in the car Ocon is sitting, and a much taller man, of course, than Fernando Alonso. So it's quite a big difference. Whether that's a help on a day like today or not, I really have no idea. Perez next to cross the line, down in 13th at the moment. 5 minutes to go, and now these lap times start to become a little more crucial.
No drag reduction system, no DRS rear wing in these conditions, of course. Oh, and then your traffic becomes ever more difficult, doesn't it, for both drivers?
Avoiding the white lines is not a bad idea through that final chicane. Bottas goes 6th fastest, Leclerc right behind him goes 7th fastest. Yuki Tsunoda still in the pits. I dare say he might not be coming out. Might just accept that he'll start at the back of the grid as George Russell pops his Mercedes up into the top 3.
Yeah, and Norris has lost that time, so he remains in 14th and a little bit under pressure to get a time on the board as Hamilton moves himself up to P5. The Mercedes going quite nicely. Lando Norris then with an arm full of opposite lock. When you're turning right in a 90-degree left-hander, something is going to go wrong.
Yeah, there's a drier line appearing, and then that dry patch just absolutely stops quite dramatically, and you hit the wet, as Lando Norris did just then.
Great shot, and even when it hit the ground, look, even when he landed, his right front wheel came off the ground again.
Going off the track, there's Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri, and almost going wheel to wheel as he comes back on the track with Carlos Sainz right behind him. Sainz there, with Gasly going off, Sainz, who thought he might have a nice clear track ahead of him, has suddenly now got the full spray into his visor.
What's the main limitation?
A great track.
So this is Sainz's weekend. This is Sainz's chance, isn't it? He will be main Ferrari man tomorrow with Charles starting at the back of the grid. Charles will still be coming through, but he'll be a pit stop behind after 2 laps, just with field spread. So Carlos Sainz can really step up here and well, his problem is how fast the Red Bulls are going to be on a dry track tomorrow.
Can he manage to get a first pole in Formula 1? Potentially. He was on provisional pole in Baku, of course, before the final run, and his teammate Charles Leclerc nabbed it off him, and not for the first time in his career, but Leclerc won't be doing that today. Is Sainz a contender for a pole or 2? Red Bulls, maybe. Lewis Hamilton with 6 poles here in the past. Sebastian Vettel, Fernando Alonso, former pole sitters here. When we get to Q3, all of those might be fancying their chances, but at the moment, Sebastian Vettel, driver at risk. Perez in the bottom 5. Stroll is plumb last at the moment. Latifi and Albon down there too.
If there was 5 minutes to go, I'd be in for some inters now. People have generally stopped improving that much. Like the wets have reached their limit. They're getting too hot. A fresh set of wets would be handy. You've got 3 sets of wets for the weekend, 4 sets of inters. They were given another set of inters for free practice 3 because it was wet. But we're expecting a dry race, so of your intermediates and wets through this session. But I sense it's just starting to get, if you can stay out of the standing water, that where you might think about some inters if you were in trouble.
In trouble at the moment then. Vettel, Albon, Latifi, Tsunoda, Stroll, Gasly at risk. George Russell setting fastest sectors. Ted Kravitz, down to you.
You mentioned Sebastian Vettel. High hopes for Aston Martin, but it's not working. Don't know whether he feels there's something wrong with the car. Just doesn't really, it's not feeling it in these conditions, these drying conditions, despite being much quicker in the full wet of free practice 3. Lance Stroll also at the bottom of the pile. They both have new set of full wet tyres about a couple of laps ago. So that hasn't fixed it. Where is the pace going to come from for Aston Martin to get them out? We've had an improvement, but it's not quite enough, is it, for either Vettel or Stroll?
Very good point. Mid-132 is maybe the crossover to Inter's. Carlos Sainz thinks it could be time for intermediate tyres as well, and that is Carlos Sainz, and he's gone straight on into the runoff area. Where's that down at turn 4? Yellow flags down there, and that's not going to help any of the drivers coming through and having to slow down. Pierre Gasly, meanwhile, has failed to follow the race director's instructions. I think that's at turn 14. By not going to the left of the bollard, he could be in trouble with the stewards there. And we have got 30 seconds to go, and we're on board with the Red Bull of Sergio Perez. He set personal best, first and second sector. Can he get himself out of the danger zone? Only just 12 fastest for Sergio Perez, and well, he can carry on because we're 10 seconds away from the checkered flag, but it's touch and go for Perez maybe as Sebastian Vettel crosses the line. Vettel only in 16th. Behind comes the Alpine Fernando Alonso, and almost hitting the wall of champions as he slid his way out the final corner, goes second fastest. Pierre Gasly crosses the line, and he's not out of the bottom 5 either, and he has taken the checkered flag. Daniel Ricciardo goes 8th fastest, puts himself out of trouble.
So Vettel will get another lap. He crossed the line before the flag dropped, and what an important lap. We thought he'd be fighting over the top few places after free practice this morning.
The pace so far has disappeared for Aston Martin, sadly, and this qualifying session has ended for Pierre Gasly, who crossed the line with the checkered flag flying, and he is out of qualifying. Meanwhile, Nicholas Latifi is fighting that Williams all the way down the main straight to try and get himself out of the bottom 5 for the first time this year, and sadly, at his home race, Nicholas Latifi can't get out of the bottom 5 again. That's massive disappointment for him. Meanwhile, Leclerc, Albon, Sainz have all been noted by the stewards for driving unnecessarily slowly. I don't know how you can do that in these conditions. How slow is slow, quite frankly, as we look to see Sebastian Vettel not improving his times necessarily on his latest lap, and also Lance Stroll setting not the best first sector either, but he's taken the checkered flag. He is definitely out of qualifying, so it's Vettel really the only one that can do something to improve his position and get out of the bottom 5. This is going to be a hugely disappointing qualifying for Aston Martin if he can't. Vettel crosses the line. No good. Out. Both drivers at Aston Martin, and on the performance that they put in this morning, Martin Brundle, that's something of a shock.
It is very much a shock. Vettel